Hello, my name is Roland Dugard, and today I will be going over the DocuSign eSignature Implementation Consultant Accreditation Program, the Capstone Project. So this is based off of the instructions from May 2020. And before we get started, I'll just go over the narrative and instructions. So Close Enough Accounting, or CEA, wants to streamline their process for creating and handling joint credit applications. A CEA representative should be able to generate an envelope containing a joint credit application in the eSignature application using a standard DocuSign template. When a prospect calls into one of CEA's many call centers, the CEA representative will collect the name and email address of the applicant and the co-applicant, along with any other information required to meet the authentication requirements of the application process. The representative will use this information and a DocuSign template to generate an envelope that is sent to each of the applicants. To speed up this process, the applicants should be able to complete their signing in any order. After the documents have been completed by the applicants, the documents are sent to a predetermined CEA credit assessor for signature and initials. This recipient is not required to authenticate since access to their email is already controlled. This recipient uses a company email address, and there are rules against password sharing. Finally, a copy of the completed document is sent, or completed documents are sent to CEA's legal department. The CEA call center representative is not allowed to remove or modify the credit assessor or legal department recipient information. All right, with that, we're going to go ahead and start the demonstration. So right now, I will be acting as a call center representative. Now from the eSignature homepage, I can go to my templates. From here, I see that there is a joint credit application template available for me to use. So at this point, we are assuming that I am on the call with the clients, and I have captured their information for this joint credit application, that information being their name and email address. So I'll go ahead and enter that information here. All right, now that I've entered the information, I also want to point out a couple things. So first, we see that each of the applicant and the co-applicant will have an access code authentication that is required for the recipient. We also see the recipient access code listed here. If I were to do a dropdown, I can change what the access code is as the call center representative, but I cannot change the fact that an access code is required to access this document. So it is important that the call representative at this point is able to, copy this access code to their clipboard and then is able to share that access code with the recipient, preferably via email, so that the recipient is able to access the document when they receive the email. So we see the applicant here, we see the co-applicant here. Similarly, they have an access code that is required. It is a different access code, so they will not be able to use the same access code. And then below, we see that there's the credit assessor whose information is here, but not editable by the call center representative, as well as the legal department who will receive a copy. They don't need to sign. And again, the legal department is not editable by the call center representative. Additionally, in terms of roles, we see that the applicant needs to sign. This can't be changed by the call center representative. We also see that both in terms of signing order, we see that the applicant and co-applicant will both get the document at the same time. After they have both completed their part of the signing ceremony, it will be passed to the credit assessor, who is number 2, and then to the legal department finally, so number 3. And then below, we're going to see our message to all recipients. So again, what we can do as the as the call center representative is change the email language that will be used for any of the users. So if for whatever reason we have users that are using different languages, we can do that. However, what we cannot do is change the email subject and email message that is going to be sent to the users. So what I have done as an admin, and we'll show this later, has been to create these specific messages. I know that as an admin, I want these particular messages to be sent to each of the applicant and co-applicant. I want a separate message that goes to the credit assessor. And finally, I have a third message that I want to go to the legal department, and I do not want those to be changed by the call center representative. So that's why they can view these, but they are not able to edit them. Okay, with that, we can go ahead and send the document. And now what's going to happen as expected is both our applicant and co-applicant are going to get an email to complete their portion of this process. All right, so those emails have just come in, and I'll pull that over to my screen now so that we can see what those look like. Okay, so first we see that we have the email that's going to come to John Doe here, the applicant, and then we also see simultaneously we got an email to Jane Doe, also asking her to review the documents. So we'll start off with John here, review documents. And now he will have to enter that access code. Okay, so now we see the information that is going to be required from the applicants. So first off, again, we are as the applicant, John Doe here. We see that his name is auto-populated into this field. We can enter in his phone number. So just to show you how this the conditioning is going to work on this, or validation, if I were to just, enter in any amount of numbers, it's going to tell me, okay, wait, you're going to have to use this specific format. So that's 3 numbers dash 3 numbers dash 4 numbers. And that's done with regular expressions, which I will also show at the end. So I'll put in John's phone number. We can put in his email or his mailing address. And now we have an option here. Okay, billing address is required unless if we say that the billing address is the same as the mailing address, we see that this box disappears and is no longer required of the applicant. So for this one, I'm going to say, all right, it's going to be a different billing address. So I'll call this 456. Social security number. Again, we see that it's going to tell us the exact format that is required. So that's 3 numbers, 2 numbers, and 4 numbers. Annual income also required. And we'll see here that as soon as we fill this in, it's going to be covered by asterisks. I will point out that on the next page, because this is a page that's going to also be viewed by the co-applicant, we don't want the co-applicant to see the social security number and annual income of the main applicant. So that's why it's hidden on here. But as we'll see, as we scroll down to the next page, we see that the applicant's identification and asset statement here has the information from above automatically populated, and this goes both ways. So if they were to fill out this part first, they would see that populated up above as well. So just to test that, we can show, or just to demonstrate that, we can show, okay, if I remove the annual income here, we see that there is no annual income up above. And if I add in, see, I realized it was off. Now we can see it's $20,000 here, and still it's hidden up here because again, this is the page that somebody besides myself, right now I'm acting as John Doe, someone besides myself will be able to see this. The co-applicant, however, will not be able to see this page. Okay. Moving on, we have the two forms of identification. So here, they're going to be required to select exactly two fields. So I'm just going to say driver's license and passport. And then for each one of these attachments, both of them are required and both of them only allow one attachment. Again, that's something that's been set up as an admin. So each attachment field is only going to allow one attachment, and they must select two of these to specify what those two attachments will be. Okay, so I'll go ahead and upload these files. And then I'll upload a passport. And now we can add in our assets. So here you must add at least one asset and up to 5 assets. So you'll have a description. As you can see right now, we only have one required field. As soon as I type in a description here, or an asset description, which is required, so call it asset 1, we're going to see automatically now a second required field has populated. So if you have an asset, it must have a value. So we'll give this a value of 5. We see our total has populated to 5 now at the bottom here. Now, now it gives me another optional field here now. It's not required that I have 2 assets, but I can add a second asset. So if I do go ahead and add asset 2, we see now all of a sudden a required value for that is there as well. So I can put that in 10, same thing, asset 3. As soon as I type in anything in that description field, it's going to require a value. And that total keeps racking up. So I'll go ahead and say that John Doe has 5 assets totaling $75. And then lastly, we're going to go ahead and sign each page. So again, the joint credit application, I'll have him sign up here. And then it will bring me down to the second page, and I'll sign this as well. Perfect. And lastly, if we're going to go down here, we can see, okay, my ID and my passport have been attached to this. Great. So I can finish my part of the application. Okay, great. So that's been completed. And now if we go back to our emails here, one, we see that as the sender, so the credit or the call center representative, I received an email letting me know that John Doe received my document and viewed it. Secondly, now I can go over here to this email that we got as Jane Doe, remember, and go ahead and review the document. So now we're going to see, and again, this could have happened in either order. Once we enter our access code, we're going to see that this information from John, the applicant, has already been entered. So we can see here, all right, this information that we just entered in the last step is already populated. We have phone, email, address information, all of that. But again, now we can't see the social security number or the annual income as Jane here. If we were to scroll down, we see that we get a brand new identification and asset statement for Jane to fill out. So I'll go ahead and fill this out quickly. Give her a social. And Jane's making a lot of money. Okay, so she'll sign this side. And now, similarly to John, we see that her information was already pre-populated down below where possible. And we can enter in, again, we'll do a driver's license, passport for Jane. Okay, and let's just say Jane has one asset and it is worth $5 million. Okay, so Jane is going to sign. She signed above, she signed on this page. And then again, we see that her ID and passport have been uploaded. So we can finish. And what we're expecting next is for the credit assessor to be given the document to review from their end. So with that, I'll go ahead and open up my email again. We see that again, the call center representative was notified that Jane viewed the document and has since completed it. And because she completed it, the document has now moved on to Charlie Credit, the credit assessor. We see that he has a different message. A new joint credit application has been submitted for approval. Please review and take action ASAP. Okay. So now again, as Charlie Credit, the credit assessor, I'm going to review this document. It's going to open it up for me. And remember that Charlie does not have to validate as he is an internal user with other security measures that make the validation unnecessary at this step. So as Charlie Credit, now I can view all of the pages. So I can view the joint credit application as well as the identification statement for John Doe and Jane Doe. And you'll notice that while I cannot see the social security number and annual income on this page, this first page, and that's by design, I can see all the information on each of these pages. So I can see John Doe's social and annual income as well as Jane Doe's. So I can go through this document. I can check it for any information that's needed. And I can go ahead and sign each page. So I'm gonna go ahead and sign that first page. I'm gonna look over the second page. It looks fine to me. I can give my initials on that page. And then again, I can look at this one. Okay, if I needed to check the documents, I can do that here as well. And I can go ahead and initial this page as well. So assuming everything looks good to the credit assessor at this point, he has signed it and can finish his leg of this. So now at this point, no further approval is necessary. If we remember from the beginning, the next step here would be for the legal department to receive a carbon copy of the document. So we'll go ahead, open up our email again. And what we see is a whole slew of new emails, right? But this is basically letting everybody know that the process is complete. So we see first off, as the sender, the call center representative, I now know that Charlie Credit took a look at this document. Now I also see that all signers have completed this joint credit application. And now I see that each of the recipients also gets a notification. So we see that Jane Doe has been notified that it's complete. I see John Doe has also been notified that it is complete. I see the legal department over here has also been notified as required. So this is their CC. And we also see a custom message for them that has been added down here, letting them know that no action is necessary at this time. And then lastly, we have this email, which also lets Charlie Credit know that everyone's completed. So again, everybody that was involved in this entire process is notified that the process is now complete, including the legal department, who gets specific instructions and access to the document as well, but is not required to take any further action. All right. Now, where can we find our document? Okay, so in terms of finding the document, just going back to the DocuSign agreement cloud phases. So prepare, sign, act, and manage. What we started out with as the call center representative when we were, filling out the information on the template and getting ready to send it would be more of the prepare stage. From there, we went into signing, having the different actors take whatever action they needed, whether that was filling in information or just reviewing and approving. Now we go into the act phase, which in our case mostly entails moving that completed document into cloud storage, which we'll show in a second. And then we'll go into the management phase, which is kind of from the back end. How are we going to maintain this solution going forward, and how is it built? So going back one step, once we completed the document, so once the co-applicant or the applicant, co-applicant, credit assessor, and legal department have all completed their steps, what's going to happen automatically is the document is going to be stored in cloud storage. So in our example, what we're going to use is just Google Drive. However, you can use SharePoint, Salesforce, and a myriad of other solutions. So in my personal Google Drive here, we see that if I just go to my recent documents, today has been uploaded already, all of the documents that we just looked at during the demo. So we see the identification and asset statement with John Doe, his 5 assets. We see the identification and asset statement of Jane and her single asset. Again, completely signed by Charlie Credit as well. And then we see the joint credit with both information as well. So all of this has been completed, changed to a PDF, and uploaded to this Google Drive automatically, as well as any attachments that went along with those documents. Now going back to eSignature, if I wanted to look at if I wanted to find this document or these documents, I could go from my templates tab now over to manage. And what I'm going to see in my sent envelopes here is most recently today's date, we see this set of documents. And if I click into it, I'll be able to see a lot more information, including, the specific recipients for this, and then when they signed, and then I can also kind of look at the signing order here and see, all right, it came from me, the call center representative, went to John and Jane Doe here, then it went to Charlie, then it went to the legal department, and then it was completed. So if there's any question about, how the signing happens, in what order, and, you can also look at this while the document is in flight, you can see, okay, if we're stuck, here, for example, you can find that out by looking at this page and seeing where the status is of that envelope. Okay, from here, let's take a look at the back end, and as an admin, how is this actually built out? So first, I want to go into the template that we built, and then I'll also talk about a few settings that are important for getting this set up as well. So from my templates, I can find the template that I want and then go to edit. This is as an administrator again. The call center representative would not be able to do this. So I'm able to do this because I am an admin in the system. Here, in this first page, we can go ahead and name the template, give it a description, and then add the documents that are going to be necessary. So here I had the first document, which is just a blank joint credit application. And then we have the next 2 documents, which are basically just the same. I give them 2 different file names, but they're both going to look like this. So it's the identification and asset statement. So it'll be one for the applicant and one for the co-applicant. Moving down, we see the signers that we have, or the recipients. So a couple things that I did here was, first off, going ahead and setting the roles for these different people, setting the information for the credit assessor, Charlie Credit, as well as the legal department, but of course, leaving that blank for the applicant and co-applicant. Also different for the applicant and co-applicant was the access codes, right? So here is where you're able to add that access code. If we were to say don't require an access code for this recipient, then they would not need to use it. Okay. From there, you can also look at this customize menu. So adding the access code. One thing I do want to point out here is that in this particular environment, we do not have the, or we have not paid for the ability to do different verification methods such as text SMS, although that is an option, generally speaking, for the eSign platform. If that were an option, that's something that I would be able to find here in the customize menu. I'd be able to find add text verification or SMS verification, and I could have that as a method as well. Since we do not have that available on this environment, I just opted to go ahead and give them unique access codes instead. Okay, a couple other settings that we're looking at here, needs to sign. So again, both the applicant and co-applicant need to sign the document. Also, that is true for the credit assessor. However, that is different for the legal department, since we decided that they just need to see a copy. As you'll see in this menu, there are a number of different options for different recipients who may be getting your envelope. Okay, other advanced settings here I want to look at is if we look at the applicant, we see that we are not allowing the sender to delete the recipient, but we are allowing the senders to edit the recipient. Okay, that's because we know that the call center representative is going to have to enter the name and email of this person, but we don't want them to be able to say, oh, we just don't need an applicant at all. Likewise with the co-applicant. However, if we go down to the credit assessor, we see that we have, and the legal department for that matter, we see that we've also checked that don't allow senders to edit recipient, because per the requirements, we know that the credit assessor and the legal department need to receive this. We know that we have their email address and information correct already. And we know that we do not want the call center representative to be able to meddle with that in any way. All right. So that covers our recipients. We also see our messages next below. So this checkbox here is what allowed me to provide a custom message for each recipient. If you do not check this checkbox, you're just going to have one email message and one email subject that will be used across all recipients. Again, that is just dependent on the particular use case, client preferences, etc. So for this demo, I decided that I wanted to have custom messaging for the applicant and co-applicant, and then have a unique message for the credit assessor and the legal department. And I did not want the sender or the call center representative to be able to edit that. So we'll cover with that, we'll cover a couple of settings on this page before I move on to the next page and show the actual tagging of the documents. Okay, so if we go up in the top right-hand corner and we look at our advanced options, I want to point out a couple things here. So this first one, recipient privileges, allow recipients to change signing responsibility or assign a delegated signer. We do not want to allow that. So again, we've already specified what the recipients need to do and who they are from our end, and we don't want them to change that. So we'll leave that. A couple other things here. So we do have, reminders and expiration, which we did not use for this project, as well as passwords. So if you need, for whatever reason, to password protect this template, you could do that here. Some things that we did use were the branding. So again, I've created branding on in our admin settings, which I'll show where that's created. But to choose that for this template is where we did it. So I have a couple different brands that I have. I use close enough accounting for this one. So that's why we'll see it associated with this, this envelope. And then lastly here, template modification. So this basically, I'm not allowing anyone to edit this template except for admins, right? So we're just not allowing the senders to edit the recipients, which we already saw. We're not allowing them to edit the message or subject of those messages. And then we're not allowing them to edit the brand. So these are all things that I've specified that I want as the template creator. And I do not want the call center representatives to be able to change these things willy-nilly. So those are some of the advanced options for this template. Okay, now moving on to the next step of this would be actually tagging template. So let me zoom out here a little bit. Maybe. Okay, so now we're looking at first off the joint credit application, and then also below this, we'll also see both of the identification asset statements. So starting off with the joint credit application, what we're doing is tagging each field where we're going to have the recipient fill out information. So to do that, we're mostly leveraging our eSignature standard fields here. So for example, full name, email, social security number, date signed are all standard fields. To add a field here, all we would do is go ahead and drag and drop onto the document. If I realize I no longer needed this one, I can just go drag it over to the left-hand side and delete it. To specify which app or which recipient is going to fill out these fields, that's done in the top left-hand corner with this dropdown. So right now we see that we are using the color yellow, and this is going to be for the applicant. If we go down here, we see that there are blue tags for the co-applicant. So if we wanted to put in more tags for the co-applicant, we go here to the dropdown and select co-applicant. And now, as you see, we're working with blue fields. Similarly, we have an option for Charlie Credit, the credit assessor, in purple field. So we see that he's just signing at the bottom here. We do not have tags for the legal department because they are not, their role is not specified as a signer. If you remember on the last page, we specified that legal department is just going to receive a carbon copy of the document. Thus, having sign tags or signature tags for them is unnecessary. Okay, so going into some more specifics about these fields, I want to point out a couple settings here. So again, full name, email, for example, both standard fields. The phone number, however, did require some validation. So if we go into this validation drop down here, we see that there is a regex pattern that's been added, as well as an error message. So this is where I say, please use format 3 numbers dash 4 numbers. And that's going to be validated by this regex pattern. So that's how the phone numbers are done. Again, each of these fields are required as well. So we see at the very top, one of the first things it's going to ask you is it's going to be required field or read only field. So this is going to be a required field, and obviously not read only because we need them to fill out the information. All right. So that's that for those two. Going into the mailing address as a standard text field. Now for the billing address, what we've done is we've set up some conditional logic. So we see that this billing address and the conditional logic drop down here on the right-hand side, we see that this field is conditional, and it's conditional on checkbox, and then it gives an actual field ID there. So what that field ID is actually, if we go to the checkbox itself and we look at its data label, that's the data label that that this text field is conditioned on. So if this checkbox is checked, then we see that this disappears, and if not, then it will stay there, and we saw that during the demo. Okay, social security number and annual income. So social security number and annual income, the main things for these two were that, first of all, so for social security number, this is a standard field. So we did not have to put in like a regular expression or something like that to ensure that it was the right format of 3 numbers dash 2 numbers dash 1 number. So that is one benefit of using the DocuSign standard fields. We also see when we look at the data label of this social security number, we see that it's automatically populating 2 fields. And so what I did here was I gave this a data label SSN1. And then I also, when we go into the next page here, gave this a data label SSS1. So now whenever either one of these is populated, we know that it's going to populate both of them. So one of them is SSS1 parenthetical 1, SSS1, and the other one is SSN1 parenthetical 2. And those are just basically tied to each other now. Similarly, with the annual income, we did the same thing. So annual income up here. So the first one we're looking at is this parenthetical 1. If we just scroll down here, annual income, this is annual income parenthetical 2 here. So those are tied together as well. What I also wanted to point out with these is that up here, because this is the shared page where both the co-applicant and applicant can see it, we have the formatting here. It's hidden with asterisks, right? So that as soon as you enter the information, it's going to be hidden with asterisks. Same thing with the annual income. However, we don't do that on this page. So here we see that the formatting is not hidden with asterisks. Similarly, the social security number is not hidden with asterisks. That's because only the applicant can view this page, and the credit assessor and legal department, who are presumably already under confidentiality, right? So the only point here is to avoid the co-applicant from being able to see these. But since the co-applicant does not see this entire page, we don't have to worry about that. Okay, so we covered all of these fields on the joint credit application page for the applicant. For the co-applicant, those fields are set up exactly the same as I just mentioned. And then at the bottom here, we just have the credit assessor signature and date signed here. Now, getting into the identification and asset statements. So I'm just going to cover one of them since the second one is, again, built exactly the same as this one, save for it being tagged for the co-applicant instead of the applicant. However, otherwise, they're exactly the same. So in terms of getting this set up, again, we have the full name, phone number, and email address, standard. And then the social security number and annual income, again, all set up as I just described a few minutes ago. Now, what's new here is we have the 2 forms of identification. So to set this up, what we did was we added checkboxes here, first of all, and made them a group. So this is a grouping of checkboxes. What's done here is just to add to this group, I could add another checkbox, make it 4 checkbox group. But now when it is grouped together, it allows me to set conditions on them as a group. So the main thing here was the validation. So we wanted to make sure that exactly 2 forms of identification were given. So here in validation on the right-hand side, I can show on the first dropdown, select at least, at most, exactly, or select the range. I want them to select exactly 2. So I select exactly, and then I chose 2. Because that is the number of checkboxes they need to check. All right. Now over here with the attachments, we actually have 2 attachment fields. One of them, or both of them, being required. However, you can only add 1 attachment to each one. So that's another setting that will be covered on the back end, which we'll show once we get out of this template. Lastly, the asset descriptions here. So again, this was more conditional logic. So what I have here is because the applicant is required to enter at least one asset and able to enter at least 5. What we have here is this first text box for an asset description is required. So we see this is a required field. And then the value here, we see that it is also required. But if we go to our conditional logic here, we see that this field is conditional on this text field. So again, this text field with the crazy ID behind it is this one right here. So what we're saying is if this field is filled out with any information, this one's going to appear and it's going to be required. Now we also see a second condition right below it. If this field has any value, again, now if any value is entered into this, which we know it has to be if this one is populated, or when this one is populated, then also show text field 941 E44 blah, blah, blah. That's going to be this next one down. So as we see, it kind of comes down as a ladder. Once you enter in information in the first, for the first asset, you must enter in a value, which gives you the option to enter in a second asset description. If you do so, that requires that you enter in a value with it. It's going to be required. If you enter in that value, it's going to give you the option to enter in a third. And if you do enter in any information in the third, it's going to require that you fill out a value for that asset. So that's how that works and goes down and goes down. At the very bottom of this, we have a formula field, and the formula here is a very basic summing formula. So it's going to take the numbers from here, which again, I forgot to mention, we specified that these text fields must actually be numbers. So each one of these has to be a number. And then we took this formula field and then we just summed these numbers above. So that's all that's doing, very simple. And then we have the signature and date signed again at the bottom here. The credit assessor can sign as well, or must initial as well. And then below, as I mentioned, we have for the co-applicants, the exact same fields following the exact same logic, just for a different recipient. Okay. So with that, I'll save and close the templates. And I do want to show just a couple other settings that were necessary to make this this project work. Okay, so now from our settings page, there's a few things I want to show. So first, in the account section, I do want to look at our brands that we created. So here we see that I had those 2 brands that we saw on the template as options for Close Enough Accounting. This is where I created the brand. So here we'd be able to add a brand or upload an existing brand. But if we go into edit, I can look at the brand name, the company name, the logo for both signing and emails, and then the theme colors as well. So that's where all of this information was defined. Okay, from brands, I also want to take a look at the rules and connections we have. So first off, if we look at the connections, there's a few different enabled apps that we had. We have our Spalding Ridge SharePoint, the My Test CLM account, as well as my Gmail account. So the Gmail account is what we actually ended up using for the for sending the completed documents to. I think that probably more ideally, you would probably want we would want to use SharePoint or possibly CLM or Salesforce. However, due to our internal security restrictions, that's why I'm using just an outside Gmail account. So that's what I attached here or connected here. So now in order to specify that a document should be moved to that Gmail account or that drive, excuse me, that Google Drive, once it is executed, that is done. And also in agreement actions, instead of connections, we're just going to go up to rules here. And we see that we have one rule enabled, and that is the Capstone document filing rule. So I'll go ahead and open that up. And we can see that we can name it, make sure it's enabled, but the big things here are the conditions and the actions. So the condition here is if the sender is me. So in this case, that makes sense because I am the only person who is going to be doing this e-signature capstone. And so I want to specify, okay, if I send a document out of here, I want to make sure that this action happens. And what action needs to happen? That's the then here. So if the sender is me, then archive the document to Google Drive, that RD Gmail, that's the one that we just saw in the last page. And you can specify the actual drive itself within there. So this is just a very simple example, but as you can see, there are options to add multiple conditions. You can add multiple actions. Even within a single action, you have different options here. So that's how the document was routed to Google Drive. And then lastly, there are a couple sending settings that I want to review as well. So going into signing and sending on the left-hand side here, and then opening our sending settings. Few different things. First off, we see that we enabled the signer attachment field. However, we did not allow signers to add multiple attachments for fields. So this was part of how we were able to specify that exactly 2 attachments are attached to the document for each recipient. Otherwise, if this were still checked, they would be able to add any number of files, or add multiple files. I shouldn't say any number, multiple files in those attachment fields. Document visibility is a big one here. So this is your options for who will be able to see different documents in the envelope. So here we specified that you must sign to view unless you are the sender. So all that means is you must be, I guess, for a given page in the envelope, you must be a signer if you want to view it. So where does that come in? That comes in between our applicant and co-applicant. If you remember, on the shared page where both the applicant and co-applicant were signers, they were both able to view each other's social security number and income, but it was hidden by asterisks. However, they weren't able to see each other's respective asset identification page. So that was because the co-applicant did not have anything to sign on the applicant's asset identification page, and vice versa. However, we know that the credit assessor did have a signature on each page, which is why they were able to view each of those pages. And we're not allowing the sender to specify document visibility. Again, this is because we have set this up on the back end, and we know that, okay, we don't want in the moment for the call center representative to be changing who can view what. That's not something that is part of the requirements, and actually would defeat the purpose of a lot of the requirements. Okay. We also enabled custom email and language for each recipient. Again, if we had not enabled this, then we wouldn't be able to check that checkbox and create custom messages and subject lines for each recipient. There would just be a standard email and subject for all recipients. Okay. And one last setting that I do want to talk about here, as I'm just realizing I forgot to enable it, is in signing and sending settings. So in signing settings, if we go all the way to the bottom here, we're going to see under envelope delivery, attaching the there we go, attach certificate of completion to envelope. This is one that I wanted to enable I had it disabled for another test here, but one that I should have re-enabled so that once the document is complete, we'll go ahead and see that certificate of completion sent out with the completion envelope. However, this was not enabled, so that's why we didn't see it. I'll go ahead and save it now. That's all right. And if we go to the last thing I want to touch on is the reports. Okay, so from the reports tab here, we're going to see a number of different reports, but just to show very quickly a basic one, we can see that there's an envelope report. So it'll give us information on envelopes sent from this account. I can view this report. And now if I want to go ahead and run it, it's going to give me all envelopes that I've sent in during this month. So since December 1st. If I run it, there we go. We see one that I've run last week and then one that I just ran today. With the status completed, we can see who sent it. We can see the recipients, and then we can see kind of when it was initiated, when it was last modified, and when it was actually completed. All right. And with that, I believe I have walked through everything that is covered on this eSign Capstone instruction page. Thank you very much for your time. If there is anything else that I can cover or anything else that you'd like to see with this project or with this capstone, please reach out. Please let me know. I'm more than happy to do so. And with that, I will let you go. Thank you.